Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books in Hindsight. I'm your host, author Matthew Hines. Today we have a great show. We have the lovely Denice Hughes Lewis. She is a fantasy writer, and she writes for young adults. She's got a number of interesting books out, and she's a screenwriter as well as a director of plays. So it's going to be a fantastic show. Denice Hughes Lewis is just a really interesting person. And before we get started, we just want to ask you to please sponsor us on Patreon at patreon.com/hindsight, or go to booksinhindsight.com. That's this podcast's website, or hindsight.com, and click the links to buy any of the great books by our authors or by myself. So, without further ado, let's bring out Denice Hughes Lewis. Let's go to the phones.
Welcome to Books in Hindsight, the only podcast where hindsight is always 2020. And we explore the great books, works, and ideas of the century. Now, here's your host, teacher, and author, Matthew Hines.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Books in Hindsight. As I promised you, we have award-winning author Denice Hughes Lewis. She is what we would call a coming-of-age author, and she specializes in preteen books. And so this is going to be a really nice podcast because we get to talk about that magical time in our lives when everything was new and everything was, our curiosity basically took the best of us. And somebody whose curiosity really leads to all different places is our guest today. And so I'm going to say hello to, again, I'm going to introduce you as award-winning ebook author, Denice Hughes Lewis. Welcome to Books in Hindsight, Denice.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, probably not as thrilled as we are to have you. So you have an extensive resume, and when I introduce you as an author, that is just like the tip of the iceberg as far as you're concerned, because in your resume, and just picking off of your Amazon profile, you are also a director. You write plays. You write music, and you are also a screenwriter. So you are quite prolific. So you want to talk about, first of all, because we want to talk about that stuff and your books, let's talk about your background, first of all.
My background. I've lived a very secluded life, really, isolated, pretty protective growing up. And so I have one of my sisters is only 22 months younger than I am, and we just had to create our own fantasies when we were playing together. So that's where the fantasy started, and we're both kind of Disney girls anyway, love Disney, love the magic of that, and that's why I'm so interested in fantasy. I also love sci-fi and comedy and adventure, but please don't show me horror. Even though I write about monsters, it's always funny when I write about monsters. So that's where I started. When I was in the 8th grade, we had to write a story and a picture book and illustrate it. And I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I'll do this when I get old. I didn't realize how fast that comes.
Wow. Well, you have a number of books. So I'm just going to run over I'm not going to talk about your, should I say, canine series yet. Let's just talk about your, your junior high age books. You got My Fairy Godmonster. Let me say that again. My Fairy Godmonster, which is a comedy, I assume. Yes. And we also have Dragon Cloud, and we have Jinx, Quest, and you have Quest 1 and 2. So your latest was My Fairy Godmonster, correct?
No, my latest is a young adult fantasy called Enchantress Sacrifice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember if I actually even read that off because I have it kind of messed up here on my notes. But okay, so let's talk about, you're talking about, I assume these are books geared towards young ladies. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Dragon Cloud really has a male hero. He's a 15-year-old boy. And he's a star baseball player. And then his sister is 10 years old. So they go on an adventure because they get kidnapped by a dragon. And then the hijinks, Quest 1 and Quest 2, the children there are a little bit younger. And two 12-inch wizards pop into Neil's bedroom through a rubber plant. And they need help to get back to save their world. But they have to visit the 10 most famous natural wonders of the world first to get magic to take back with them. So those are for readers like from 1st to 3rd grade. My Fairy Godmonster, Dragon Cloud, and Enchantress Sacrifice can be read by anyone who can read and who's interested in adventure. And there's always something hidden in there. I wouldn't say hidden. I don't slap people in the face when I want to tell them that they need to learn how to be responsible for themselves and they have to love their siblings and things like that. But I show it in my adventures and in my stories.
All right. So now you're opening up that line of questioning, Denice. First question is, you have a theme in your books that it talks about on your Amazon profile where you talk about coming of age. These are coming of age books, and you like to highlight choice and you like to highlight responsibility. Now, so really you're teaching morality in your books. Where does this come from? Are you coming from a teaching background, or where do you see a need for the morality in the books?
I'm just coming from a grandmother point of view. I've studied a lot of metaphysics and things like that too. And I really think that the kids of today need to realize that it's their life is their responsibility. They may have things that happen to them that are out of their hands, but when they're getting older, they're starting to make their own choices, and they need to learn how to make the choices that will help them in the world.
That's great. I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there that are very thankful when they go out and buy a couple of your books as opposed to authors that, I don't know. I didn't want to talk about what's out there, but yeah, it's really refreshing that you are trying to teach some of these, morality choices and things to these kids who are being taught these days. It seems that somebody's just going to take care of them and everything's just going to be fine. So, all right, let's talk about when was your first book published? Because I'd like to get a time frame of how long you've actually been writing books.
I've been writing books for over 40 years, but I didn't publish them until 2 years ago. You know how it is with writers. Sometimes you stick things in drawers and you don't do anything with them.
Now, how could you be writing books for 40 years when you're only 30 years old?
It's magic. That's what fantasy is all about.
All right. I had to check on that. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure that I actually believe that, but we'll have to take your word for it. All right, Denice. So let's go into, so you've been writing for 40 years, and the first books were, and obviously this is before, you probably, are your books are not self-published. Your books are published by a publisher.
No, they're self-published.
Okay, so where are you? Okay, so have you been publishing for 40 years, or you just been writing for 40 years?
I've been writing. I submitted and things like that too. But when you're a mother and a wife and all that kind of stuff, it kind of comes first. So until my children were out of the house, although I started writing then, I really didn't pursue it as any kind of a career until they were out. And then writers tend to also sometimes be introverted and not have enough self-confidence. So you can write forever, but if you want to share with the world, then you need to do something about it. And that's when I decided that I would self-publish my books.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a choice many people made just because it's so much more advantageous for us. So for people that are listening right now, I just want to point out your website is DeniceHughesLewis.com, correct?
Yes, www. Yes.
Okay, and it's a really amazing website because she has so many other interests besides just writing books. So I encourage you to check it out. So let's talk about you grew up in a rural environment. So I kind of was in the same situation as a younger kid. You know, you're out in the woods basically, and you let your imagination run wild. Did you have access to a lot of books when you were younger?
Well, I didn't live in a rural when I was growing up. I lived in Lancaster, California, when it was a lot smaller than it is now, which is Southern California. And so I just lived on a street like everybody else did until we moved to Oregon. And we still lived on a street until we moved out of town, and that was it for me. As soon as I lived out of town, I thought, this is where I want to be. You don't have to worry about the lights and the traffic. And so even though most of the time we've lived out of town, and now we still do. So I live on 4.5 acres in this middle of Oregon.
All right.
We have neighbors.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to, I don't know if you can see this very well. Can you see my shirt?
Oh, if I put my glasses on, yeah. Oh, Tillamook, yes.
All right. That's just for you. Got that down at the Tillamook plant in Tillamook. All right. Yeah, that was just kind of to help you ease you into the interview, just kind of to break the ice. So, all right. So apparently I assumed that you had grown up in a rural environment, but I was wrong and you didn't. And so at what point were you in a rural environment when you started to write? Was that where you felt now is the time?
Yes, really, yes. We were living out of town. My husband was working 13 miles away in a school because he was a school teacher. And I decided to fill out the information in TV guides. When we used to have TV guides, they wanted to know, do you want to be a children's writer? If so, fill out this application. And so I did, and you had to send some writing sample in. And then I guess they pick about a third of them. And so they chose me, and I got to pay them to teach me how to write. So I took 2 courses from them. The first one was a 2-year course, and you end up having your own instructor, and it was all correspondence. This is right at the beginning where computers started. So I had a typewriter that could use a computer for 3 lines, and that was it. And so we corresponded for 2 years, and then I took an advanced book writing course from the Children's Institute of Literature. That's who were sponsoring this, and wrote Dragon Cloud, which is one of my books. Of course, everything goes through a lot of rewrites before it gets to the final thing. And with Dragon Cloud, I entered a Don Pointer's global eBook awards. I think it maybe had been the first year he had it. And Dragon Cloud won in the preteen category. So that was kind of encouraging.
All right. Well, congratulations on that. Isn't that something to have something that you did actually get recognized by other people? It must be just fantastic.
It did, because with his contest, you're competing against published authors. And so that was kind of fun for me.
Right. And Dragon Clouds is pretty commercially successful even now, right?
Well, you have to understand that just because you're a writer doesn't mean you're a marketer. And that's been I call it my downfall. It's my fault because marketing is not something writers usually like to do. And so now I'm working with some people who can help me with that. Because if I market, I don't write. And if I write, I don't market. And there has to be a meeting of the ways in order to really be a successful writer.
Thank you, because you are the first writer I've talked to that even myself has even come out and said that, but how true that is, and how everybody that listens to this is going to thank you for finally being honest about this, because that's what happens. And I interview people from New Shelves. They do they help people with publishing and book launchers. And it's always the same thing as people finish their book, and myself included, and you are so burned out and you go, I don't want to go and make a website, and I don't want to, fill out emails, and I don't want to bother people about my book. They're just supposed to buy it. So yeah.
Well,
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is kind of the rub now is with self-publishing, is that, and even with publishing in the traditional sense, it's just that you really have to turn into a full-time marketer. And me personally, I just have to say, I cannot do both. I can't be a writer and a marketer. I'm in one mode or the other. So I don't know how you're going to handle it, but that's basically how it is. I can't really do both. It might be male selective brain, but
no, I don't think so. I think that, I'm a treasurer of a local writers guild, and I notice that a lot of people have the same problem. And especially if you're going the self-publishing route, Amazon publishes a million a day or something. How is anyone going to find you if you don't find a way of standing out? So I am working with Amy right now, hoping to help myself, I guess.
Yeah. And, you really, if you don't, you're basically going to be washed, in the sea of books. You're going to be at the very bottom. So the thing is today, as far as I understand it, and I've got 5 books, and I'm doing a podcast because that's what I think is the wave of the future for all authors, is that we're all going to be out like interviewing each other, right? And and it's all about creating as many links on the internet and being on as many things as YouTube and whatever else, because the more places you are, the more you show up, and that's just how the internet works. And I don't know if that many writers really understand that. I figured it out, but I went full swing into the marketing side. So
that helps. But you have such varied books. Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I just like to write basically to entertain myself, and if I don't like it, just like you, I'm sure, I'm not going to bother writing it. So anyway, let's go back to Denice. And Denice, you say your last name is Hughes Lewis, and I'm going to at one point probably mess up and say Huey Lewis. I don't know if you've ever had that before, but
it was when teachers were calling my name in school. It was Denice Hughes. Oh. Lewis is my married name.
Okay.
So I'm kind of used to people messing up my name.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna do my best not to. All right. So you are actually in a community that has a lot of artists in it. Is that correct?
Yes. We have, I don't know, 3 or 4 theater groups. Lots of art going on here. It's a resort area, but it's such a beautiful place to live. We attract a lot of everything, and artists, whether they're writers or, physical artists, they're everywhere. We don't often come out of our houses sometimes, but there are always a lot around.
Yep. If we weren't antisocial, we sure wouldn't be artists, I'm sure. All right. So let's. So you're living in kind of a rural community now, and you've got the support of people around you. What was the influence of being a parent on your books, and what was your kids' reaction to your books?
One of the first screenplay I wrote music that went with it, and so I would sing the songs, and my kids still remember those songs, but they're sitting in a drawer like everything else. When you're mostly it was, well, I've never grown up. I always think that my brain is like a kid's brain, and it doesn't really always like to have to, accept the responsibility of an adult, even though it does. And so raising kids, I just had fun. We're on the floor playing with them, playing games, interacting, and I haven't ever grown out of that. I just get to do it with I used to get to do it with my granddaughters. They're now teenagers, and so it's like you're a different kind of playing with them now. It's not on the floor. It's games and intellectual things to keep them stimulated. But I just haven't ever grown up, and I like to keep that sensibility because I think it's full of wonder and magic.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I absolutely identify with you. And when we were talking about where you grew up, and I just had assumed that you'd grown up in like a rural area where I had grown up. And so that leads to there, like back then there was I think we had one Canadian television channel, and all I had for entertainment was books. And so I just was always constantly reading. And it really, having all that time to think, it really sparks your imagination. And so I think that if you lived in like an urban area, there's just too much distraction like I live in now. It's kind of difficult to focus on things. And so does your living in a rural community, do you think it helps your creativity?
I don't think it matters where you live as long as you're a creative person, because usually you're in a room with a computer writing. It certainly is inspiring to look out your window and see the pine trees and maybe a wild animal or something. It just depends, because we do have the people that live around me are only, like 4 acres away. So it's kind of a rural community on its own. The town is only 100,000 people, but if you're driving on the streets at 9:00, there isn't much traffic. It's just a kind of the best place to live is 10 minutes away from things that you can be involved with if you want, but, in the quiet, peaceful countryside if you want to.
Yes. All right, Denice. Now, in our correspondence, I keep thinking of this idyllic scene. You've got a rural house. There's probably a pond, and then the deer are running by intermittently, and maybe an elk every now and then. Am I way off here?
Well, I haven't ever seen any elks here, and we do have herds, usually about not more than 12 deer that will come through here, but it's seasonal. It depends on what time of the year. You do have to be careful whenever you're out driving and getting to town, because they do get hit, and I just can't stand having to hit any animals. I don't want to do that. Occasionally during the day, you might see a coyote if you're lucky. I saw a wildcat, a lynx once, but that's very, very, we're not that far out of town where I don't want to see the mountain lions. I know they're around. I don't want to see those because I have a 6-pound dog. It's bad enough knowing there are eagles and owls who will eat my dog. So she doesn't get to be outside without me. So mostly it's the owls that I would have to worry about. Even though I know people who live down by the river, their dogs get attacked.
Okay.
By other things.
Yeah, I understand that. And you live in an area that is actually has a lot of, I don't want to get into this topic, but it's got a lot of like paranormal stuff going on down there. Is that correct?
No, well, I am not involved with any. I'm not sure. I think there's paranormal stuff going anywhere, but I'm not connected to that here.
Okay. And like I said, I don't want to get into that, but if you see on YouTube that area of Oregon, you've got your UFOs and your Bigfoots or is it Big Feet?
Well, we do. I actually wrote a screenplay about Bigfoot, and I know a hunter here. He's an international hunter and a writer, and he's actually told me one time about some scat he couldn't identify that was in the woods. And he's been everywhere. He knows the scat from a lion to a coyote to a giraffe. And so it's not impossible that there could be Bigfoot here. I don't know. I don't particularly want to see one. They're supposed to be pretty smelly.
Yeah, and pretty big. So I think a lot of people would agree with that. So, and for people who don't know what scat is, I'll just tell you a story. I used to live in Alaska, and my first hike out, I was really excited, and I was out by myself, and somebody said, "Be careful, there's some bear scat up the trail." and I had no idea what bear scat was, and until actually I think I stepped in it. So then I learned what bear scat was. So, all right. So let's go back to we've somehow got into Bigfoots and paranormal stuff, and let's go back to kind of paranormal, I guess. Let's go back to my fairy godmonster. And then I want to move over to the Enchantress Sacrifice. So what's the story behind my fairy godmonster? Is this like a stepmom or something?
This is a Cinderella story.
Okay.
So Winifred and her father raise horses in a rural area in Oregon, and her brother has been off to college, and he brings home his fiance and her family so that they can plan a wedding in the family garden. Well, the mother of the fiance is really a very uptight, controlling kind of person who Winifred calls the rat, because that's who she reminds her of, a weasel. She has a younger sister. The fiance has a younger sister who is just like the mother, and she's the rat. And then the little girl has a 20-pound Persian cat who is not very nice. And the little girl takes over the bedroom. Winifred goes into the attic to stay. And when her father and brother have to leave on business, she's left alone in the house under the rule of the stepmother-in-law. And that's when she needs a fairy godmother. However, the fairy godmother crashes with the fairy godmonster because she rides a Harley in the sky that has wings and breaks the fairy instantaneous manifestation monitor. So Winifred gets a fairy godmonster instead of a fairy godmother.
Oh, boy.
And the fairy godmonster is kind of a cool Tyra Banks kind of person with, spiky orange hair, a foxtail, fangs, and claws. But she's very cool.
All right. So she is going to support this girl, or she's going to be against her?
No, she's there to support her until the machine gets fixed. Unfortunately, she has a magic whip, and it is not working. So Winifred has to hide her in the attic with her and then keep her there, which is not something the fairy godmonster particularly wants to do. And that's where all the problems arise.
Aha.
Because the little girl wants to find what she's hiding in the attic. And so Winifred is working a lot to get the house ready for the wedding. She's also out exercising her horses. And she's just a busy girl, especially trying to keep the fairy godmonster in the attic. Okay.
And then does this fairy godmonster, does she eventually, she's only there for the time that the potential mother-in-law is there, or how does she get released? Without giving away the book.
Until they fix the communication and beam her out, she's stuck there. But you have to understand, we have a timeline here because the wedding is in a month. So there's all kinds of plans in a normal wedding besides Winifred coping with the little girl and the cat. And Winifred has a dog who's a mastiff, big older dog, and he doesn't get along with the cat, so he's relegated to being outside. The cat gets swallowed by a magical item that the fairy godmonster has and disappears, and so it's just one nightmare after another that Winifred has to cope with.
Oh boy! And how old is Winifred? I'm sorry.
Winifred is 15, okay. And not only does the stepmother, her husband, and daughter come, but also the best man and the best man's brother, who was a couple years older than Winifred, and now she's attracted to him, the first boyfriend in her life. So she has a lot going on.
All right. So let me ask you, Denice, is this art imitating reality? Have you been in some of these situations before?
It's really interesting because when you start writing and people want your platform and they want to know, what you're doing. And I'm thinking, I don't know. You don't know anything when you begin. But I have found a pattern, and that is that I write about isolated people that feel isolated, that are put in situations where they're the ones that they may have help, but they really have to solve their own problems. And Winifred learns how to grow. She has to grow up a lot, and then she is accused of doing something she didn't do and doesn't get to go to the wedding reception, and ends up having to birth a horse in the dark in a storm. So there's a lot going on in her life, and I think that I'm hoping that teens can identify with that, because sometimes life can be overwhelming, and it certainly is for Winifred.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That is the most appealing thing about that book, was that you are talking about how people are isolated, and especially what teen is not isolated. So it definitely offers, probably a little comic relief and, oh yeah, I know how that feels kind of thing. So, okay, well, that's
Right.
great.
What's interesting,
So go ahead, continue.
I was just going to say, I write it from Winifred's point of view, so you get into her head, you know what she thinks.
Okay, great. And that's when you're that age, you really want to know that other people are going through the same stuff that you're going through. So what about the Enchantress Sacrifice? First of all, who's getting sacrificed? Is it the Enchantress?
Possibly, yes. It has more than one meaning. There's an isolated island that is protected by a light barrier. No one can see it. And so on the island are two different tribes. One are the Ice Lords, and one are the Keepers. And the Ice Lords, they're the ones that run everything. The Keepers are the hunter-gatherers who are very superstitious. Well, it's against the law for an enchantress to be born. And when an Ice Lord mates with a keeper, that's what happens. So as soon as that happens, they're slated for death. So her mother is killed moments after she is born while trying to escape, and she's rescued by a dragon kind of monster and taken underground for 16 years. There's a mysterious mentor underground with her who teaches her, but they all expect her to be the savior of the island, even though the people of the island want her dead. So when she's 16 is when she comes into her powers and is expected to do, to save the island and fight this beast that she feels, because she's an empath, but she also, when she's 18 and they take her up above the ground, she ends up getting the power of lightning and the light. But she doesn't want to accept this responsibility. And in the meantime, a ship has broken through, and a teenage boy from our modern world lands on the coast. And she has to save him, because anybody that is a stranger will be killed. And so that starts her interest in a love interest. And she decides that she's going to find a magic pool that she's read about that can get rid of her powers so that she can be normal and have a normal life. So she's avoiding her destiny.
Okay, wow. And then what's the age of the girl in this one?
This is she's 16. This is a young adult.
That's right. She came to be 16.
In any of my books, I don't have language or things like that in any of my books, so they can really be read by younger kids or older adults.
Well, it sounds exciting, and I'm not a young girl, but I'm sure you get a lot of. I'm sure you have a lot of fans. Your book sounds so interesting, and wow, what an imagination you have. When I was going over some of the stuff that you've done, I just said, boy, how can you be so diverse in the things that you write? But can you just talk a little bit about, let's talk first of all, Dragon Cloud, we talked a little bit about it. You want to say anything else about that?
Dragon Cloud is an adventure, and it's really written from 2 points of view. So you get into the mind of the young dragon and also the boy. And I think it's interesting because how do you know what a dragon thinks if you don't write from his point of view? And since it was the first book I ever wrote, and at that time you're not supposed to write in more than one voice, but now it's an accepted thing, and that's just how I started. Because I needed to know what they both felt, because the dragon's in his own dimension, the boy is on Earth, and then they have to come together. So it's an exciting adventure, really about the responsibility and not making rash decisions, thinking first before you make it.
Okay, and then let's talk about, because I want to get into your dogs, the books that you've written about dogs. But before we do that, let's talk about the Hijinks quest. You have Hijinks 1 and 2. And for those of you who are young people, Hijinks actually means funny situation. Is that not correct?
Yes, funny situation. However, the wizards are called Hi and Jinx. Those are their names.
Okay. Wrong again. I've been wrong in every count so far in this interview.
Well, I'm just a little crazy.
Okay, so Hijinks, you have wizards, you have two books of that. So I just want to go over your books before we move on to some of the other things that you do. You have My Fairy Godmonster, you have the Enchantress Sacrifice, you have Dragon Cloud, you have Hijinks, and that's quests 1 and 2. Any comments about Hijinks besides the 2 wizard factor?
Oh, they're just fun. Jinx kind of gets in trouble because they lose half of their magic, and his wand doesn't work as well. He gets into trouble. It's fun. I like going to the 10 natural wonders of the world, even though each book will only be one natural wonder of the world. And in the first one, mistakes happen, and instead of going to the Grand Canyon like they're supposed to, they go to the Grand Cayman Islands and then end up turning into turtles. And it's just kind of a exciting adventure.
They don't open up an offshore account or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
No. They travel in magic.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all of your books sound so interesting. I'm just going, boy, I want to finish this up so I can take another look at these. And just so you know, Denice's books are available on Amazon.com, and also have them listed at Heinessight.com, HEINESSIGHT, and booksinhindsight.com. I have the affiliate links for all of her books. All right, so let's go back to your other activities, the other things you've been up to, Denice, and let's talk about what kind of plays are you writing? Are we going to see them on stage? What got you into that?
My best friend is a fabulous artist and also a playwright, and so she wrote 2 plays and asked me to direct them, and so I did. I'm not directing right now because she moved away. She's not writing plays right now. And I decided that it would be interesting to write my own. There is a children's theater group here, and I will eventually hope to work with them to get this. It's just a short one. They do what they call black box production sometimes, which is no sets and very little costuming. But I wrote one about the 3 little pigs and a female wolf who is accused of eating them. So it's a takeoff on the 3 little pigs and who's on first base, second base, third base. And I just wrote it because it's a different format than a screenplay or a novel or a poem. And I thought it was a good thing to learn how to do.
Okay. And so has this play been performed by the local tots at the school, or?
No.
Okay.
No, not yet. It's just sitting on my computer.
Okay.
You get to a point where you get so scattered in what you're doing and have so many, things in the pot that you have to pick which one is most important first. And right at the moment, I'm writing a sequel to the Enchantress Sacrifice one, so that's taking up my time.
All right. So you're writing a sequel to the Enchantress Sacrifice, and when are we going to see that?
Hopefully by March.
Okay.
I hope it's by March.
Okay, great. Well, you have to come. You have to come back because we need to talk about that. And we haven't really talked about. We haven't talked about your pets. Now, you have some unique pets that you're obviously quite proud of. And my question is, first of all, please feel free to talk about them. But do they inspire anything in your writing?
I think everything in your life can inspire you. I mean, my dad hugged me a certain way, and I put that in the book. When you're a fantasy writer, you're making up a lot of things, but you still have to do research for certain items. You want to be accurate if you're describing a certain kind of tree. But the thing that's universal is the fact of the emotions and the feelings that you put into every book. They come from your experience. They come from your life. They come from things that stick out in your mind that have happened to you. And you can't write a book without them because it would be flat. You have to engage the reader and have an emotional reaction from them in order for them to want to continue reading the book. So all of my animals, I have a great love for any kind of animal, for my family, actually for the whole world. And so, yes, they do inspire you. I'm trying to think. I guess the only books that I really have pets in is My Fairy Godmonster. Mm-hmm. That's the only one I actually have a cat and a dog because that fits with the Cinderella story. I do have mice in there, but they're magnetic.
Okay, so but you have a 150-pound goat, right?
Yes.
A blind dog, a blind horse.
A blind pony, yes.
Blind pony. And what's with the dog?
She's a 6-pound Pomeranian.
Okay.
And my horse, she's a pony, so she's only about 700 pounds. She's what they call a POA, which is a Pony of America. And it's really it's not a miniature horse. It's a smaller horse, but the proportions are all right. It's not actually like a fat pony that is Shetland or something like that. She's like a horse. Just smaller. Okay.
Well, Denice, let's talk a little bit about the other series of books that you've written, and where I'm trying to get you to just open up and talk about. You have 5 or 6 books just about certain breeds of dogs, and excuse me, but I think these dogs are talking. Is that correct?
Well, actually, they're journals, and so that's different. There's something I have to hit on my computer that's covering up your face. Oh, dismiss. I hate pop-ups. Anyway, I'm not talking about specific dogs. What they are journals. So inside, say, thoughts of a Rottweiler's journal, you're going to have a whole 365-day calendar so that you can write down every day what you think your dog is thinking or what he is or she is doing. The first page really talks about the specific breed. This is what a Rottweiler is like. This is what a Chihuahua is like. And then you fill in, the colors, the name, but it's all from the point of view of the dog. So the dog might be saying, this is what I dream. These are my favorite things. This is where I pee. This is what I like to do. I mean, all these things are prompts for the writer to write in, but they need to write it from the dog's point of view.
See, now, Denice, you told me about that. And I said, oh, this is exactly what my wife wants to do. But that's exactly the book she needs. You didn't tell me that she could just write in, because my wife is convinced she knows what these animals are thinking. Any dog, because she grew up like an only child, and she had a German Shepherd was like her companion. And so she seems to understand what dogs are always thinking. And so she would benefit greatly from that book. Do you have anything for German Shepherds?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have 17 books. One of them is for cats. One of them is for mixed breeds. But there are over 360 some breeds of dog if you look it up in the Kennel Club. And so I just picked the 10 most popular ones and then added a few of the smaller ones. I haven't even done one for my dog yet.
Okay, so now let me make it clear. So these books are actually interactive. You just fill in your information, correct?
They're a journal, yes, but they're a journal from the dog's point of view. In other words, you're not going to put his age or his weight unless he tells you what's it in there.
Right. That cheap son of a gun fed me Alpo for the third time this week.
Right.
Something like
right.
that.
And there are places where you can, glue in pictures because they want you to know who their buddies are, who their best friend is, where they like to play, their favorite toys. But I just thought it would be interesting. I always look at my animals in their eyes and I wonder what they're thinking. And so I thought this would be a fun way for owners of dogs and cats to do it. And if you don't have a specific breed, you can get the mixed breed one, because mixed breeds, they think they're very important because they have the best of everything.
So, okay, in the last book, I listed that on my website. So the mix is not, it's a mix. It's not a certain breed, right? Because I was going, what is a mix?
Well, a mixed breed, that's why there are 3 dogs on the cover, because they're all different and they're all mixed up. So that's what it is. Most people have mixed breeds. If you're not, wanting specific German Shepherd or a Chihuahua or a Pomeranian or something, most dogs are mixed breeds, and they're also sometimes healthier than your breeds because their DNA has been mixed up, so they don't have the typical disease, say, that a golden retriever will have or could have with hip dysplasia and things like that.
Right. Well, I have to go out and buy that book now before my wife sees this. So, okay, well, that's one. All right. So, what was the inspiration to buy these? You just you watch the dogs and you kind of guess what they're thinking?
I took a course in writing for journals, and you had to, of course, come up with an idea. And I thought, I'm not a nonfiction writer, really. I make everything up. And so how can I make this fun for me? I love nonfiction, but I don't write it myself. How can I make this fun? And the idea just popped into my head, well, why not have a book from an animal's point of view and let people write what they think? Because I've talked with a lot of people who know what their dogs think or think they know what their dogs think. And I thought, I can do this. This is a good thing to do. And that's how it started.
All right. Well, that's great. So are these books also available on Amazon?
Yes. You can only get them in paperback because you really can't do a digital journal because you have to fill everything in. That
makes sense now, because I was looking for the links for the Kindle book and no, I couldn't find those. So, all right. So another mystery solved, as Inspector Clouseau would say. Okay. So we've got just a few minutes left, Denice, and this has been an amazing talk. Would you like to say anything to your readers out there and anybody who might be a potential reader?
Don't wait as long as I did to publish your books. You need to have faith in what you're doing. If you want to share it with someone else, there's always a way to be able to do that. And I think it's important that we write down how we feel and the things that we want to share with other people. And now that self-publishing is so much easier to do, you don't have to wait to be accepted by a publisher. You do have to be sure you're doing a good job. You have to know how to write. You still have to have the beginning, middle, and end and everything else that goes in between. But you can do it yourself. I did it the hard way because self-publishing, the only thing I didn't do was the covers. And I happen to have a son-in-law who is a graphic designer, so he could do my covers. Most of the time, it costs more money if you need to hire people to help you format, help you learn how to get it on Amazon and create space. Well, now it's Kindle publishing instead. And so it was a lot of hard work and a lot of learning, the learning process to get it in that form. But if you want to do something badly enough, you'll do it. And I encourage all writers to step out of your closet, step out of your mind, and write what you want to write. And if you want to share it with the world, please do so.
Well, those are great inspirational words. So if I want to write a screenplay, I've got this great idea. how do I get started?
First of all, you need to start reading screenplays. They will help you because the format is way different. You can get formats that are free online to learn how to format a screenplay. Reading one is important. Starting to write one. Learning the format is the most important because in a screenplay, you have to have the bare minimum description, interior patio, or it would be interior living room day. And then you have a description. And then your dialogue you have to have in a separate place. It's not like writing a book. Sometimes I think it's easier only because you're writing 100 pages instead of 250 pages. But the format is tricky, and you really have to learn how to hone your writing skills. But there's so much free information online, and that's where you need to start. You can take classes. And I started, with probably one I shouldn't have. I start with a big blockbuster fantasy musical animated thing, and I still love it. And maybe someday I'll get it produced. I don't know, because I wrote the music for it. But you can learn how to do anything. There's so much free information online. That's where you need to start.
Is that okay? I don't know how you would. I'd really like to promote that. I don't know how you'd even. Do you have a title for it yet, or
for the screenplay?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I've written over 12 screenplays.
Oh, okay.
It's called Fairy Light.
Fairy Light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, hopefully we're going to see that because lots of people see these podcasts and listen to these podcasts, and you never know who's going to say, "Wait a minute." And I think you're going to find that people are going to say, wait, she's got some really good ideas there. And I mean, just look at all the stuff that's out now. Look at how many movies you could make from your books. So I let's just hope that some of the right people are listening or will listen to this podcast. So, all right. So let me ask you this. So you were talking about, go out and, find resources, and no, you didn't. You did the entire book, the books yourselves. How did you learn about formatting and all of those things?
Well, formatting for an ebook is a little bit different, and you can just buy one online or look at it and see how it's done, because you don't have to worry about the space between the chapters and things like that. You do have to know how to work in Word so that you can put an end to the chapter so that it doesn't all run together. But most people who are reading digital books, they can change the font and they can do whatever they want, make it bigger, make it smaller. So they have ways to adapt it for whatever machine they're reading their book on. As far as a paperback is concerned, I just picked a typical easy to read font, found the kind of font I wanted for the chapter headings, because I wanted a little different for Dragon Cloud, a little different for My Fairy Godmonster or whatever. And then as long as I make it into a PDF form, they can't change it when I'm putting it in the form that they need to put it in.
Right. And you sound very comfortable with the process. I was not comfortable with it at all. And one of the reasons was I kept going on YouTube and watching these videos about formatting. And sometimes they were right and sometimes they weren't because of the dating of the technology and the programs.
Yeah, well, I think I write as if I'm going to be doing it in a digital form now. So it's just, the heading is the right size, and then I just write, and then I end the chapter with a page break or section break, and then I just continue. So it will be ready once people read it and see what they think and how I need to fix it and edit it, because I'm also an editor. But you don't really want to edit your own things. You need other eyes to look at them eventually, and so that's how I write now. So it'll be ready for a digital form. It was a big headache to Create Space in their format because they have it specifically made. So what I had to do was unformat all my story and put it in theirs and reformat it. It was a headache. It took forever. Now you can go to Fiverr, Fiverr.com, and hire people to do it for a lot less, but I didn't have any luck doing that with the person that I picked, so I ended up doing it myself.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And what a headache it is. So, and I noticed that you did not, correct me if I'm wrong, but nothing on iTunes, iBooks.
They should be getting on there now. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. Because I'll keep an eye out and
Right.
put them on my websites because that is a pain in the neck.
Yeah, they're in the process of getting an Ingram Sparks, and luckily, my marketing people are doing that for me.
I'm going to have to bring Amy back out here now. So I said iTunes. Are you formatting for iTunes?
No,
Okay.
well, no. I
Okay,
guess that's probably different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's totally different. You have to they have a template that you have to basically fill in.
Then I
And
haven't done that yet.
well, if you ever undertake it, get a big jar of Tylenol or something because you're going to need it. Well, all right. I think we're getting pretty close to the end of our chat here. Is there so we've got the Enchantress Sacrifice is coming out in March. And are there any other?
The sequel to that is coming out, and
I'm sorry. Yes. And do we have I don't know if you would even say, you wouldn't say the title because you don't want anybody to steal it, right?
No, because
it's not out yet.
Titles can't be copyrighted. So it's okay.
So we don't want to say what it is yet.
No, yeah, we do.
Oh, we do? Okay, go ahead.
Enchantress Sabotage.
Enchantress Sacrifice and Enchantress Sabotage. It really sounds exciting. And I really hope that all the, girls out there, women out there that love this kind of stuff are going to get onto Amazon and buy it, or go to Heinessight.com or booksinhindsight.com and buy it. That would be better for me. All right. Well, Denice, let me just say before you go that we are talking to Denice Hughes Lewis. She is an award-winning ebook author. Her books include and are not limited to My Fairy Godmonster, Enchantress Sacrifice, and soon to be Enchantress Sabotage, Dragon Cloud, High Jinx Quest 1 and 2. So fun for basically the whole junior high school, I think, and basically probably all the way down to elementary, all the way up to grandma and grandpa. So, all right, Denice, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. I think you're my first award-winning author, so it's really great. And if you are listening to this podcast, please remember it's available on YouTube. And so you can come and check out Denice is very beautiful. Come and check her out and listen to or watch the podcast on YouTube. But we will also be available at iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. So this is Matthew Hines for Books in Hindsight. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, get onto Denice's website, check her out. She is at Denice Hughes Lewis, DeniceHughesLewis.com. That's a mouthful. And check out her books, or check out her books at Heinessight.com or Books in Hindsight. So we're going to say goodbye to Denice. So goodbye, Denice. Say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye. Bye, everybody. Bye, Matt. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Denice. And for everybody out there, this is Books in Hindsight. And please keep on reading.
This has been Books in Hindsight with your host, Matthew Hines. Please join us for our next podcast and look for our archives on iTunes and go to thehindsight.com. That's HEINES site.com for great books by Matthew Hines and other great authors.